Okay. Okay, hello everyone. Good evening. Hope we're all good. My name is Axel Kacoutié, and I am going to talk about sound design, primarily from the work that I do at Today in Focus. First of all, I want to just thank Case for what the sound design / synthesis that we saw. That was pretty cool. And I think there's a relation to how the thought process behind manipulating sound and using sound to kind of evoke a feeling or a mood that I would also apply when actually scoring a podcast, basically. So I would say that the way I distinguish sound design would be that in the factory line of how a podcast is made, the body of work is made by the producers, and it comes to life with how the sound is treated. And I could show here that so this is something that would be handed over to me usually from one of the producers, and then after that, when it's done, what it looks like is, I'm not going to save, like this basically. So it's loading again. So we use Qbase. And I think it really does the job. Personally, it's, as you can see, it's the episode that I'm going to be talking about is called A Week of Protest, and it was one of the Black Lives Matter protests that was happening in the States, and it's fun to talk about because pretty much I love a good protest montage, basically, and you can see it's separated from the guests at the top, the voices at the top, and the music and the archives at the bottom with a bit of sound effects too. So, you know, you've got the archive, you've got the music, you've got the reverb, and you've got the delay. And it's broken down like that. And essentially, what I want to break down first is how music makes a difference with what we hear. So I will come to this in a bit, but first of all, I will talk about, so this episode was, I believe was used in the opener for one of our episodes last year, talking about Google and its internet security. And so it's, yeah, it speaks for itself. So I'm just going to start first of all with this.
Google. It is the world's most popular search engine, allowing us all to find things very quickly and very easily.
But how much does Google know about you?
No one knows as much about its customers as Google.
Does Google, through this phone, know that I have moved here and moved over to the left? It's either yes or no.
Not by default.
But is Google really good, or is it evil?
So yeah, nice and simple. It's very jazzy. It's very what I imagine podcasts sounded like before I started working on Today in Focus. And I guess it was kind of like, it had a lighter touch to it, which the cynicism of the internet and how the paranoia that it inspires, especially in relation to our personal data, for example, sounds quite nightmarish. You can sense the anxiety, you can sense the confusion, and it's that kind of interpretation that I use and that I let inform the process of like picking the music. So I kind of wanted to reflect something like that. So the after treatment goes something like this.
Google. It is the world's most popular search engine, allowing us all to find things very quickly and very easily.
But how much does Google know about you?
No one knows as much about its customers as Google.
Does Google, through this phone, know that I have moved here and moved over to the left? It's either yes or no.
Not by default.
But is Google really good, or is it evil?
So because these working sessions were at the office, this is the reason why I can't lift the bonnet any more than what you see right here with the WAV files. But essentially, yeah, it's like I said, the approach is something that's a bit more haunting, a bit more quirky, a bit more electronic. And I think because I have a music background as well, I kind of liken the the explanations, the moments that are the pauses for dramatic effect, as like how a DJ or a music producer would equate a drop. So this bit here, I'm just going to play this bit again.
But how much does Google know about you?
No one knows.
So yeah, how much does Google know about you? Wait for the drop, and
No one knows.
We go even further into the music, into the rabbit hole that is the confusion of the internet. Yeah, so that's a little breakdown of just like how the music can really inform what you are told to feel, how to feel, to indicate something that's coming up later, because the following sequence after this is Anushka, the presenter, talking about her wonderful experience with Google and how it has lovely photos and moments that commemorate, I don't know, Mary Seacles thing, Mary Seacles' birthday, or something to do with a woman inventor that we didn't know about, for example. So it has this like nice little cute search engine kind of vibe, but this is the grittier, dirtier stuff that we all need to be cynical about, and that's what I wanted to reflect. So it's a lot more exaggerated in this sequence, just so for when Anushka talks about how pleasant it is, you can feel it a bit more. So it's music choice plays a part in the sound design, I think, because it kind of colors the space that you're working with. I would say I think I have a lot of painting kind of metaphors to kind of illustrate what I mean in terms of like my approach towards it. And also, I forgot to say at the beginning, if there are any questions, please feel free to interject at any point, because yeah, I have an idea of what I want to touch about and stuff like that. But if there's anything I missed, please let me know. So I'm going to go on the main body of what I wanted to break down for this talk. And it's, yeah, so every episode has an opener. And for me, the openers for Today in Focus it's really the trailer of the mood, the trailer of the headline, the thing that everyone knows what's going on. And we're about to go deeper and unpack it a lot more. So I spend most of my time on the opener, because I think that makes a difference between someone who wants to listen to an episode or not. Because of course the topic is one thing, but how it actually sounds also makes the difference, and the framing of it all really matters. So I think it's because the benefit of this is quite self-explanatory. So I'll play it, and then if I break it down, and if we can break it down some more afterwards. So yeah.
The day after George Floyd was killed, they began. Protests. First in Minneapolis, where he died, and then as the days went on, across America. Kenya Evelyn, a Guardian US reporter, has covered protests like this before.
In the streets of Ferguson this morning, rioting protesters are furious that Officer Darren Wilson will face no charges in the shooting death of Michael Brown.
But the speed and urgency of these demonstrations have stood out to her.
You see a different energy. You definitely notice that there's a different sense of anger in just how quickly the protests spread nationally. And there's a different sense of, this time, enough is enough.
What doesn't surprise Kenya is why this is happening right now.
There are three major socio-political issues that are impacting African Americans disproportionately. We have a massive global pandemic where right now African Americans only make up 14% of the US population and make about a third of all COVID-19 deaths. That's because of longstanding healthcare inequities and many racial inequities in our institutions here in the US. And what that is translating into is an economic downturn that is disproportionately also impacting African Americans. In fact, 1 in 6 African Americans lost their job on account of this pandemic. And so when you compound that with your everyday racism, that can eat away at you over time. And if you create the right spark, you're going to have a community that just has had enough. That is exactly what not just African Americans, but oppressed people, disenfranchised people, people who've been at the bottom, people who feel forgotten have just said, you know what, this is enough. I'm ready to fight.
From The Guardian, I'm Rachel Humphreys. Today in Focus, looking back on the protests that have shaken America.
So, and it goes in straight into that. So I think it's only a minute 50, if not just a bit more. so it's not that long on paper. But I guess my first impressions when listening to this, apart from the obvious mixing things, so when I talk about mixing, I mean volume, I mean the levels, as in like the actual level of the audio. So we have Rachel and we have Kenya talking, and how they sound next to each other. Is there anyone louder than the other? Can I boost up certain sentences more than the other? It's really that kind of detail, just so it's constant throughout. And it's because obviously the information is important, and the overall delivery of it needs to be felt. So there's the mixing side of it. There's the pacing. I distinguish from mixing simply because that's a bit more rhythmic. There are certain words I want to accentuate. There are certain moments I want to sit in the listener for a bit longer as well. And the delivery for me it's what pricks my ears, and what I want to zoom in and focus on is essentially like, okay, that's interesting. How am I going to work around that to really achieve a dramatic effect? Because personally for me, I love anything that's to do with drama, anything that can accentuate it even more to heighten the experience of a daily news podcast, I think is like a lot of fun. So there's that. And we already talked about the music, but the music in this one, of course, as well, is really important. How am I going to crystallize and capture the mood overall? You know, is it going to be different music at different moments, or do I take the time to find the right one that encapsulates the whole mood of the situation, of the most important situation happening right now politically in the world? And you know, so there's a lot of stakes for me, but obviously like this is a topic that matters a lot to me. And if I were to tell the story, and using Rachel and Kenya as my mouthpieces to kind of illustrate this, you know, where do I begin in terms of like that emotional resonance, I guess? So like listening through as a whole, it's all about gauging the emotional forecast of the episode, of every moment that I want to score and every moment I don't want to score, because there'll be times as well where it's purely information. It's enough to just pace the information that's given, rather than to distract you with the mood and anything else with it. It's meant to be raw, delivered, dry. Dry as in like no sound, not content-wise. But yeah, so those are the kind of the thinking points, and those are the things that I listen to. And of course, as well, the archive, the clips that you hear, the protests. Is there anything more that I can do to stretch it, to repeat, to cut out sooner, etc., etc. So that's essentially, so this whole section here, there's all those little things to think about: the pacing, the mixing, the music, and the sound. Are there things in this already that I want to hear more of? And I think the best way I make these decisions when I'm listening at the beginning is, of course, I'm listening, but I'm also kind of like, I'm not looking at what I'm listening to. I'm essentially just trying to see what I emotionally respond to, because I think that is the most human thing with all kinds of storytelling. If there isn't a human emotional connection, you've already lost the crowd, I think. So this right here, this section right here is the WAV version of this, but already yeah, the WAV version of this. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to play it through once, and then after that we can talk about the body of this, basically. So yeah.
The day after George Floyd was killed, they began. Protests. First in Minneapolis, where he died, and then as the days went on, across America. Kenya Evelyn, a Guardian US reporter, has covered protests like this before.
Police are working to clean up after a night of protests in Ferguson, Missouri. That's after prosecutors announced a grand jury decided not to charge Officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown.
But the speed and urgency of these demonstrations have stood out to her.
You see a different energy. You definitely notice that there's a different sense of anger in just how quickly the protests spread nationally. And there's a different sense of, this time, enough is enough.
What doesn't surprise Kenya is why this is happening right now.
There are three major socio-political issues that are impacting African Americans disproportionately. We have a massive global pandemic where right now African Americans only make up 14% of the US population and make about a third of all COVID-19 deaths. That's because of long-standing healthcare inequities and many racial inequities in our institutions here in the US. And what that is translating into is an economic downturn that is disproportionately also impacting African Americans. In fact, 1 in 6 African Americans lost their job on account of this pandemic. And so when you compound that with your everyday racism, that can eat away at you over time. And if you create the right spark, you're going to have a community that just has had enough. That is exactly what not just African Americans, but oppressed people, disenfranchised people, people who've been at the bottom, people who feel forgotten have just said, you know what, this is enough. I'm ready to fight.
From The Guardian, I'm Rachel Humphreys. Today in Focus, looking back on the protests that have shaken America.
Cool. And that's also, that's with the classic Today in Focus sting at the end of it, just to mark it off, to let you know that we are we've gone from one thing to the other. So where to begin? I think, okay, I'm going to start with the music. I'm going to start with the music and take it from there. So overall, my approach to the decision of this moody cinematic feel is just, again, to bring a large scale to sense that, to really feel how big this actually is, but not in an overstated way. I really wanted it to just be a subtle presence that just represents the anger. If I solo it, you can really hear it with certain parts of with the cello in this. So there's the cello is my favorite instrument, and anything that's as expressive as the cello, I'm all for. And yeah, so like it has almost kind of like a Hans Zimmer-esque feel to it, which I'm a massive fan. But yeah, anything that's cinematic, I think that really aids the mood of that. And as you can see here, I have looped the last note, possibly. I'm going to find out and probably be wrong, but I think that's what I've done. So I'm going to move this out of the way and stretch out what originally comes next. Actually, let me play it first, and then I think you will see why I did what I did. So this is what it sounds like with the loop. So it's that continuous loop, because I just wanted that note to sustain for the rest of what Kenya had to say. So I'm going to now mute that and stretch it out, and you see, and this is the thing with library music. Obviously, you're not in control with where the music goes. You've got a piece and you've got to work with it. And having a music background, I have a background of songwriting, remixing songs and stuff like that. So like I get any opportunity really to be able to make someone else's song my own. I revel in that. So that is, no hesitation here. So this is what it sounds like originally. So you can see like it's still slow, it's still pensive, it's still evocative, but I know that it's going somewhere else. And the reason why I wanted to sustain this note is because what Kenya was saying, I could tell if I zoom out, you can see here and here, she's about to wrap up before Rachel gives it from The Guardian. I'm Rachel Humphreys, today in focus, ... So I wanted to wrap it up as well, just basically to match the same energy. That note there felt the most right. So if I basically just, if I skip skip this forward and bring it here, for example.
That is exactly what not just African Americans, but oppressed people, disenfranchised people, people who've been at the bottom, people who feel forgotten have just said, you know what, this is enough. I'm ready to fight.
Sorry, it's a bit of a clash there because there's a reverb tail there too, which I'll explain in a second. But yeah, it's a real conversation between what Kenya's saying, what the archive is saying, and what the music is saying. And there's no wrong or right answer with this. It's more about this is where I want it to land. You know, like the music has gone somewhere. This is where I want it to land, and I want to land where Kenya says what she says. So yeah, another note on the music as well. The reverb tail here. So like without, I'm going to mute this. Without this reverb here, you can hear how it sounds. It's pretty underwhelming and nothing really happens.
To fight.
So that's without the reverb on this archive here, no justice, no peace. But also, and you can see it there. That's the tail end there, but also for the cello music too. So it really has a flat, harsh ending, basically. And so with it,
to fight.
From The Guardian.
That came a bit soon, but you can hear it. It's a softer land, and it tails on for a bit longer, which just means that the emotional impact of what was said, you know, like the emotional dust of what was just said, lingers for a bit longer, basically.
I'm ready to fight.
And again, with the archive, you hear no justice, no peace. Again, just for dramatic effect. Now we add another reverb tail on that last word, peace, for example. Now we've got two real massive.
Enough. I'm ready to fight.
You know, so like it's like it really does. It stays with you a bit longer, and I feel like that's a better transition into into Rachel bringing us back to the room and saying,
from The Guardian, I'm Rachel Humphreys.
You know,
today
okay, cool. So that's the typical furniture that exists. We're back. We now know what we're about to expect, and we carry on that way. And okay, yeah. So that was the music with the body of what was done. Sadly, no, I think so like you get so I think you may have noticed that, for example, Rachel's delivery is slightly different, and also there are some new clips as well. So those are editorial decisions made during or before actually handing over the final piece. So I know, for example, like this clip here where we got that little news chunk. It's different because there's a man talking.
Police are working to clean up after a night of protest.
And I think in the other one is
in the streets of Ferguson this morning, rioting protest.
So it's a different take. That's what the producers decide, the execs decide. Sometimes also I'd have a say if it feels like, do we not have, or I know that there's something else that may basically sound better. And again, it's all emotionally led, really. Because that's how you remember things. So the fun thing with this now is a conversation between, so I've chosen the music. I've laid it at the bottom as the base of what was going on. That's the mood. This is the space that we're in. But there's also the literal geographical locations of where these demos are happening. You know, Minnesota, Louisville, Ferguson, etc. At those locations, you want to be in there a lot more too. And I think if we just listen to like the first 20 seconds in the original handover.
The day after George Floyd was killed, they began. Protests. First in Minneapolis, where he died, and then as the days went on, across America. Kenya Evelyn, a Guardian US reporter, has covered protests like this before.
In the streets of Ferguson this morning, rioting protesters are furious that Officer Darren Wilson will face no charges in the shooting death of Michael Brown.
But the speed and urgency of these demonstrations have stood out to her.
So yeah, that's 20 seconds. I said 30, sorry. 30 seconds when I said 20. Anyway, So you could tell already if I play this now.
The day after George Floyd was killed, they began protests. First in Minneapolis, where he died, and then as the days went on, across America. Kenya Evelyn, a Guardian US reporter, has covered protests like this before.
Police are working to clean up after a night of protests in Ferguson, Missouri. That's after prosecutors announced a grand jury decided not to charge Officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown.
So what I want to bring your attention to, and I hope you've noticed this too, I should have said before actually listening, but the archive now, it plays for a lot longer under what Rachel says. It's layered a bit more now under what the news archive says. And I've actually looped a lot more of what's heard as well. And yeah, the most obvious bit was the bang that we hear. That didn't exist in the first handover, or the first draft. And I suspect, and I hope I'm right, that I was originally, this was the original state of it.
They began.
And I think all I just did was drag it back just to see, because with chants, you want to basically hear as much as possible to be able to either loop it or to to loop it, or to see if there's anything else interesting that you can bubble under before you raise the actual bit that you want to hear. So I think, let me see. So it was a happy accident of discovering that there was that little explosion. Could be a Molotov, could be a gunshot, who knows, but it's dramatic and it's a lot more visceral. So when Rachel says they began,
George Floyd was killed.
Oh.
They began.
So yeah, when she says that, it grabs your attention a lot more. And that's what we want, don't we? We want to grab the attention. We want you to be there, to feel it all. And as you can see as well, of course, when the presenters, whether it's Rachel or whether it's Anushka, recorded it, they obviously don't record one knowing how I'm going to score it or to time to the music of Tiff, for example. That's pretty much me and my pacing and what I've already done. And you know, that's the rhythm of what I've set down basically. So of course it is just a raw, slowly read piece.
The day after George Floyd was killed, they began protests. First in Minneapolis, where he died, and then as the days went on, across America.
So yeah, we hear, it's the pace of that compared to how I've deliberately brought the narration in and out, for example, is also something to consider, because you really do set the pace of the tone of what you want everyone to listen to and how they want to feel that. So again, the loop of that just adds a lot more color in the background, and crossfade is your friend with this, because it's almost seamless. So I think if I just bring it from here, because I can tell from the web form, this bit is the same bit as there. So George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! George Floyd! Because I think that chant happens, I think, only twice, and if I move on to something else. So it's all out of sync. This sounds like it's the archive is pulled from either video or something like that, where obviously they're not editing or recording this in consideration for how I'm gonna mix it to in focus episode. So it's finding just a happy enough length to make it seamless, and that sits under nicely, and you barely notice it.
Kenya Evelyn, a Guardian US reporter, has covered protests like this before.
So, and that's the thing as well. Also, when you're dipping the music, there's a lot that you can actually get away with, luckily, because you're listening to Rachel and you're not listening to how precise my editing is under her. So that's also something to consider, what you can afford to get away with, and where to put your energy in. And that's the same pattern that you see happening here, for example, in this clip. See, so that wasn't necessarily the most precise cut, as you can hear. That's a bit messy, but obviously because Kenya's talking over it.
Right now, and African Americans only make up 14% of the US population and make about a third of all COVID-19 deaths.
So you may have noticed it now because I've brought your attention to it, but in reality, you're not, especially for the first time. I don't know how many people listen to the podcast the second time around and notice these things, but hopefully not that many. Otherwise, yeah, I have to work for a lot longer. So yeah, and that carries on the same way, and it's the same principle of choosing the music, same principle of pacing words, and adding that dramatic tail end at the end to really leave a lingering feeling of like that just happened, and we're going to find out more, for example. So it's a real subtle thing. It's nothing necessarily complicated. Really, the only complicated things, they're not necessarily complicated, as more time consuming, and it's where you want to put your energy. That's where you want to put it. That's what you prioritize. And I guess there's probably something to say on the decision of the actual use of the Today in Focus theme, because there are a number of variations of the music that I wrote for this. You can see it's like 30 seconds. This is the original theme throughout, for example, where yeah, so this is the typical one where you can talk for a bit. There are some natural pauses in there too to add for any anticipated effect. But really, this one it's quite dynamic. It has its own rises and falls that really encapsulates most of the themes, and you know, it's newsy. It teases, it points to what we're talking about, etc., etc. So there's that version. There's a short 30-second version which I don't use as much. The same version with a beat, for example. You get versions with, I don't know, just a kick, etc. So there's those versions there. These versions are just beds. They speak for themselves. This is what I kind of use at the beginning with the Today in Focus as the tease. So this one is bass number 1, which is my personal favorite go-to.
Today, as Trump continues to sow division in response to protests across the US, we ask what these past 11 days mean for America.
So you have that version, you have one which is strictly piano or unplugged. Well, that's quite spacey. So all the different vibes, but I think the reason why I went for the version that you hear here, which is like the bare minimum, only just like the signature sting at the end, is just so I can do as much as I can here. Well, I want to sit in that section as much as possible before transitioning into we're back in the room and we're here to carry on with it. Excuse me. So yeah, also, yeah, if there, again, any questions, please feel free to drop them through. Would be good to try and answer any if possible. Or if I'm making sense, then that's great as well, because I also am quite self-conscious of like rambling on for a bit too long. Anyway. So I think that is kind of like the long and short of it. And if we could go on throughout the rest of the episode, it's essentially the same thing. It's the moments that sound dramatic, whether it's a montage like this one, for example, that I can see just by looking at it, For example, how does this sound?
We're seeing the same shouts for basic humanity and to allow people to breathe and live freely all across America in the streets. I can't breathe! 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 I can't breathe!
I'm here to announce that former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin is in custody.
Last Friday, Derek Chauvin, the officer who knelt on George Floyd, was charged with third-degree murder. And then on Wednesday, this was upgraded to second degree. And the other 3 officers involved are now also facing charges of aiding and abetting. They appeared in court yesterday. How significant is all of this?
For many African Americans, justice does not end with charges. Justice ends with a conviction. And it's not just a matter of
yeah, so that again is the manipulation of the original track, and I wanted to end on this one note here. That's just, and again, it's a classic tail, reverb tail that supports that transition into what Kenya says in that answer. And yeah, that it's quite a sinister one. And again, with this one, I wanted a universal sound throughout. I wanted to keep as much of that gritty cinematic feel as possible, because, well, it's a personal challenge for me to try and keep every episode to have that same that signature basically of the mood or what's going on. I mean, obviously every episode is different. Some places you are going left, right, center all the time, especially with the Brexit ones or the more political ones. There's a lot more transitions going there, and you really have to be flexible with that. But with this one, we know what we're getting. We'll know what we're going to talk about, and I want the listeners to stay in that. So I think that really resonate. Well, it really marries with what I mean in terms of how the sound design brings life to the storytelling of what the producers handed over, because there is a lot of decision of like, how do I want you to feel? What colors, what colors do I want you to see this filter through this filter? How do I want you to experience this episode, basically? Of course, there's conversations with the producer in terms of like what's expected, bits to look out for example, you know, there could be some sequences with the archive, with the clips, such as the protests, for example. It may have been, for example, chopped up pretty harshly, simply because that's enough to get for us internally to understand what's going on, but for me to really take my time to flesh out. Other times it's just a conversation about the quality, how can I negotiate with that, and other times as well, it's just a conversation of what this bit is really funny, for example. Can we really emphasize that? Can we really do something with it? And yeah, I think those are the kind of conversations there, and it's then after that left to me to kind of interpret it or reinterpret it, and to really make it shine. So of course as well, there is the typical, you know, like it's compressed, it's EQ'd as well. There is a filter as well to get rid of any room sounds. And yeah, there's the reverbs here. It's just, again, there's nothing fancy. It's just the Qbase stock reverb. There's plenty of that, plenty of options in there. So nothing too fancy. But these are just generally tend to be the ones that work. And really, I'm quite keen to explore different reverb sounds. There's a lot of ways you can make something sound like it's underwater, for example, but which water do you want it to sound under? Is one of those things. But yeah, I think I could go on, but I think that is the main crux of the things. And I really wanted to focus on the opener simply because I think that is the difference between someone staying and listening and or just thinking this is not for me. So thank you. Oh, wait. Okay, no, there's questions. I did not see this. My bad. Wow, there's a lot. There's a lot. Okay. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna scroll through a couple of them. Sorry, I really thought there were. Okay. Anyway, so yes, how much directions do I get from the host? Yeah. So like, I think I've answered that question about in regards to yeah, the handover. That's a handover chat. And this is how I want it to feel. This is where I want it to, I want you to stay in that space. This is how I want you to, or like, this is like, we recorded this. It was really funny in the studio. Can we reflect that, for example, in that way? Can we make it funny? Can we make it sad, etc.? So that there's a negotiation there. Sometimes I will try and it doesn't work and I just do my own thing and just tell them that didn't work. But yeah, that's the main thing there. I'm gonna go down for some processing, like leaving or removing breaths. I think when there's music and archive happening, there could be the thing. Actually, if I had a bit more time, actually, I would have found moments where you had to insert breaths because it doesn't sound natural. But I can say, for example, even listening with Kenny's one now, if I just solo what it actually sounds, just like, for example, you can see I've cut here, literally this gap here, just to make it flow a bit more. And I want to see what it sounded like originally and explain why I did that. So quickly.
There are three major socio-political issues that are impacting African Americans disproportionately. What are we seeing right now? Well, we have a massive global pandemic where right now.
Okay, so that's that. So if I now see.
There are three major socio-political issues that are impacting African Americans disproportionately. We have a massive global pandemic where right now.
So in that instance, there was obviously a bit more that was left there, as you can see from a previous sentence, but I wanted to keep the breath here.
We have a massive
breath, as in like the gap, because if you connect it together,
we have it
sounds quite rushed and amateur in that sense. Usually I would keep the breaths simply because it just sounds more natural, especially when there's no music under it. You want those moments to sound as natural as possible.
Is that people like to pretend just does not exist in the North, and so that is why we are seeing.
See there, those I think are two different breaths.
And so that is why.
Oh no, it's not. It's the same thing. Yeah. Anyway, my bad. But no, that's my rule. My measure is that if there's no music under, we're actually listening, trying to make it sound as natural as possible. So keep the breaths. If there are montages, you have more scope to manipulate, and because you're using music also as breaths as well as beats. Everything is musical. Everything has a rhythm, and you got to find it in how they speak. Because Kenya is very different to her rhythm of speaking is very different to Rachel's, very different from Anushka's, etc. So you wanna, if everyone has a different feel, and you want to honor that, and you want to make sure that when you are cutting, you're not perking your ears thinking that's not how she talks. This is a weird edit kind of thing. So you want to honor that. Good source for music to use in podcasts, or do I make my own? So I think obviously, yeah, this is a mix. Like the theme song I wrote, and I wrote that using Reason, if anyone wants to know, and I've got samples there too. So there's Vienna, and there's other plugins that I've either that are free or whatever like that. If anyone's interested, feel free to get in touch, and I'm happy to share about that. But we use primarily Epidemic Sound, and I've got my playlist here. And the great thing about Epidemic Sound is that there are stems in them too. So, and if I want to just get that, okay, because the reason, if it goes on for a bit further. So there's all those elements there, drums and the melodies that I don't like and I don't want it there. So hopefully if I dig in a bit more, so that's what I don't want. So it could be in a melody. And it is. And that's where I go from there, basically. So like that, if I like a particular mood and there's something that is laid with other parts of it, then I would try to isolate it as much as possible before going in there. There is another one called Art List as well, and again that is is also used for video as well, but that doesn't have stems. So this one in this session, it was art list, as you can see there. And yeah, you really have to be a lot more specific with what music choices you make, because there's no stems. But yeah, this was crafted over a period of time, well, 2 years actually, to find the right kind of moods. Especially you want to keep things active, moods that feel there's motion in it. There's ones as well, just like a note drone to hold the suspense, etc. So Epidemic and Art List are the two that we use. Let's see. Okay, as you've got a tight turnaround for a daily show, how much time do you allow for play and experimentation before locking creative choices in place? That is a good question. I think it's that's why the playlists exist, because over time you have found songs that are like, I really like it, it's really quirky, but I can't use it for this one, or it just doesn't work. You've made the sequence work for like 30 minutes and it hasn't worked, and you to your own you hate yourself afterward because you couldn't make it work. But then for another episode, maybe the next day or 2 years down the line, actually works, and it's like, yes, I finally used it. So it really is a trial and error thing, but depending on when the things are handed over to me, so like there'll be things where like it's a day turnaround. I remember a lot with the Brexit episodes, we were left to I was left to basically like, here's the thing, I just edited it, just find something that really works, and then after that move on to the next. So I had I was lucky enough to just be like, okay, they're editing, so let me take the time to find things that I imagine works given the brief that it does. And sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't, but it's better to have a working thing than to not. And over time you have you're able to you just know what works, basically, with the politics, and hence the names of the playlists, because it just helps as a go-to thing. What are the most difficult episodes to score? The never-ending Brexit controversy must have been a difficult one. Yeah, I think that one, I think because I know that the drama of Parliament, the drama of Brexit, it can be seen either like as a pantomime, or like a operatic free act piece, for example. So yeah, that's that. I'm gonna have to wrap up now, I just realized as well. So, but yes, yeah, okay. Sorry, I should have seen this earlier, but my bad. Okay, thanks guys for tuning in. Hopefully we can do this again another time, but for now,